Welcome, Wargamers, yet again to the rough and tumble wastes of the mortal realms. Today we are continuing our conversation about the Animosity Coalitions for 2022, the Bleeding Wilds, so to speak. Again, if you're just now catching up with this video, there are two more before it in this series. The first one introduces Animosity, the worldwide campaign, as a setting. What's going on there, why are we focused, and how you can join in this year's game. So I'm very hopeful that you'll go watch that video. There's a link to it in the description. Get caught up. The second video was covering the three of the various coalitions. These are the factions that you and I join, and basically as we play this giant campaign out, we're trying to get our factions, whatever that might be, to achieve their goals to the detriment of the others. We covered 3 of them in my last video. We're going to cover the remaining 3 in this one. Now, one thing I want to add right up top here is if you like this video, if you're interested in Age of Sigmar and you want to buy some models to participate, maybe in next year's if you are just now buying them, please consider using the affiliate link in my description down below, because Noble Knight Games is an awesome store here in the US with discounts on all GW products, and using that link goes a long way to supporting me, my wife, this channel, all of its life-changing stuff, and I appreciate every bit of it. Now, as the most briefest of recaps possible, we have to remember that the context for these coalitions is that the realms of metal and beasts, Chamon and Gur, are bleeding into one another. The magical River is binding them together, and it's important to note that the god beast Mogra Ra, I believe is how you pronounce it, is trying to reform. Its spirit is in Gur, its body is in Chamon, and so as all these crazy things are happening, an ancient evil is trying to stir as the realms bleed together. I have a full video with all the lore for the background in the description down below. Go check that out if you want to see the fuller picture. Get some more context. But rather than having every person on their own all trying to scrabble into this region and kind of coordinate that, the folks over at Animosity created what's called coalitions. These don't have any kind of faction or moral affiliation whatsoever. So any army can be a part of any coalition, but they represent common interests. So yesterday in our last video, we talked about one of them, and just as an example, it was the Sky Guard of Drac, meaning a Carriage and Overlord Skyport fell down, and they are just hiring anyone and everyone to come help them reclaim a bunch of salvage and put it back in the air. Right, that's the coalition story. Now, the people they may hire to do that may be morally dubious at best, so that's why you'll see Order armies working alongside Chaos ones, alongside Destruction. It doesn't matter, you're all under the same coalition. That's the identity that kind of takes precedent over what necessarily your particular faction would do. And it's also an opportunity for creating fun stories to have weird combinations of factions working together. Now I'm going to say it multiple times because it just did not sink in last year from these videos. Any faction can be in any coalition. Okay, my Bone Splitter Orcs, who are as sharp as beach balls and as naked as hairless cats, can be in any single one of these coalitions. And so we'll kick off our discussion of the last 3 coalitions with the Cult of the Burrowing Fang. Now, primitive cultures are a thing that show up all across Age of Sigmar lore. I mean, they're just kind of mentioned briefly, but you'll see kind of allusions to small cults or tribes of people scattered all across existence. One of these small cults has actually revered animals in their worship in Ghiran, Realm of Life. Which makes perfect sense, right? Life is teeming all around them, why wouldn't they revere or at least, ascribe animal-like aspects to things that they interact with? Maybe when they think about Alariel, they don't see her as, lady riding giant ramming beetle. They see her as, the basic bumblebee that facilitates life across the entire continent, like it does in our real world. I just picked a random animal, I'm sorry. But the point is, they revered animals, and they had a very heavy ceremonial emphasis on snakes. The wise women and men of that group received visions that in Gur, if the whole tribe was to go there on a great pilgrimage, they would find a champion to lead them. And along with this, they also saw visions of lots of fire and calamity and a coiling beast encircling it. Again, a kind of a nod to their reverence of the snake or the lizard. Well, to sum it up, it was a super rough journey. A lot of them died, but they were rewarded when they got to Gur because they found their leader, who it turns out is a very unique type of character within the mortal realms. It's a Saurus war chief who became coalesced long ago, named the Voice of Embers. Now I'm going to read the description of this character to you because I can't do any better job than the writers over at Animosity. Bred for war and honed on the battlefields of ages, the sun-blooded Saurus champion lived only to serve the great plan espoused by the Slann mage priests. Yet faith broken is a deadly venom. The last survivor of a scale cohort sent into the wilds of Gur, he was left to coalesce in the realm of beasts for many long years. In this place, so like the wild jungles that sang in his deepest memories, he realized a shattering truth. The Slann had become everything that he had been created to fight against. The chains that had enslaved his people were even deeper and more insidious than those of the dark gods, for they were built into the very core of his being. No more. It was in these savage lands that the cult found him, led by visions of a messianic champion. They gave him a new name, Voice of Embers, whose words would spread fire to the stars. Driven by renewed purpose, Voice of Embers swore to free his kin and all the realms from the tyrannous order of the Slann. So as a quick sum up, we have a Saurus warrior, very high ranking, who was left to basically coalesce on his own in the realms, which if you're not familiar with that and how Seraphon work, they are essentially starlight energy, but if they remain in the realms long enough, they become concrete. So rather than like just oozing out starlight or whatever like they used to, now they bleed. They become real, corporeal is probably the best word to describe it. And their attitudes change as a result. They start acting like animals that could die, or creatures, or more independent than they would if they were under the all-consuming mind power of the Slann. And so this one was on his own in the realm of beasts, so not only is he gaining more sentience and individuality just by being separated from his kind, but also keep in mind that the longer you stay in any particular realm, you gain traits that match that realm. So in the realm of fire, for example, he'll become very impetuous and angry, hot-headed if you were. Well, in Gur, he took on the aspects of predator and prey. He began to see his former leaders of the Slann as predators that need to be struck down, which to me makes for one of the coolest and most compelling of these coalition leaders. Like, whether or not you're super on board for, the burrowing fang as a religious order, meaning they have visions, they allude a lot to the worship of snakes and stuff like that, this dude's mission, the thing that he has galvanized them to do, is to basically go full Gur and kill anything bigger than you. In his case, with his personal backstory, it's related to the Slann. But there are tools and resources in this location that will further his goals in doing so. So to me, it definitely wins outright for having the coolest singular character leading them, if that's what you're into. And also, it's a perfect example of why anyone Chaosy would work with Seraphon, is because this guy has super rejected everything it means to be a Saurus. The next coalition is known as the Underbow Sepulchre. And this one requires a little bit of explaining, okay? This is, to me, it's almost, if you read the lore packet in the description, it's like an elevator pitch, sales pitch, for a really cool faction idea. Essentially, a Sylvaneth grove expanded into Gur, taking over a huge forest there. Now, unbeknownst to them, deep underground was a giant ziggurat. This was an old location, from way, way back in the day when the Slann and the Masters were doing their great plan, whatever. We're talking millennia ago. At some point, they stumble upon this sepulchre that they've built their entire grove around it, not knowing it's there, and inside they find a clutch of dragon eggs. Now, we're talking the kinds of dragons that the Stormcasts use, where they're the big, big, massive dragons, full characters, they have their own minds and sentience like Draconith. But the problem is, they seem to be suffused with the realm of metal. These eggs look inert, but they sense life in them. And being Sylvaneth, of course, they would be able to sense life magics, and so they know that there's something living in them, but they can't seem to do any kind of magic or ritual to bring them back to life. Now we're going to pause in our story. At some point, a necromancer enters into the woods. Could be for a lot of reasons. Feel free to make your own if you can't think of any good ones. But essentially this necromancer looks at it and says, well, you know the powers of life and I know the powers of death. What if we basically tag team this and we try to understand how to get these eggs out, right? Because regardless of what side of the spectrum you're on, whether you love Nagash or you love Sigmar, there's no denying the fact that this clutch of eggs represents an immense amount of power. And not just power, but opportunity. Because that race is long since extinct, so, whether or not you control them or not, there's power in bringing them back into the realms. So the ultimate goal here that we get from this collection of factors, right? The necromancer coming into a Sylvaneth place as they're looking over a whole bunch of frozen in metal, so to speak, Draconith eggs. What we end up with is a character known as Necromancer Drakenot, a branch witch who is a practicing necromancer. She studied the magics of both life from Ilariel and death from this necromancer who taught her everything as they were passing through. So it's a faction of dualities. And I love that. I feel like it's pretty well represented in terms of we have life magics, but to achieve our goal, which is to resurrect basically a dead race, right? Get these eggs cooking again, she's had to master both life and death. And so their stated goal is, of course, to bring these eggs back into working order, so to speak, right? Get them cooking again so that all of a sudden we can have dragons one day, because that's the ultimate expression of life magic, is bringing life to this lifeless, inert egg. And that giant god beast that's under the ground that I mentioned in my setting introduction for this year, Madra Rao, I believe is how it's pronounced. Well, the idea is, what if we used death magics to resurrect that? Wouldn't that also be the ultimate super weapon? I mean, even if it's just in defense of the eggs here, it represents an immense weapon. A god beast level on your side is awesome. And so that is my basic introduction to the Underbow Sepulchre. It is Death Sylvaneth, and I love the idea. It's something I wanted to make as an actual army on a tabletop for a long time. Don't know if I'll ever get to it, but I like the concept. So rather than being character driven like the one before this, I feel like this is more theme or vibe driven. And our last coalition this year is the Storm Dance Reavers, and I will give a spoiler, this is the one that I chose to join. And this is essentially a motley crew of beast hunters. It is led by a character named Captain Castian Storm, a fleet master of the dark elf fleets that they have. Came over for his undying need to go hunt the biggest, craziest monsters. Now, he's never given a voice as to why he's doing all of this. It seems to be like a very pathological need to go deeper and deeper into Gur to hunt for bigger and bigger monsters. He's never given a reason, but his crew is just totally down with it, because every time they take something down, they get more valuable resources that they can sell or things that they can trade. Everybody's getting rich. That's all that matters. He brings in a whole lot of destruction factions, because who's better to hunt than the hunters, right? You got to get them on your side. Now we're hunting big monsters. Whole orc wogs have worked for him and found themselves rich with all kinds of fancy adornments because of the monsters they were able to hunt. Now, one thing we do get from this Captain Castian Storm is the idea that whatever god beast they are hunting, meaning the core god beast that's in the setting of this year's Animosity, he believes for whatever reason that there is a massive treasure trove and, of course, the resource of the body itself. Meaning, we mentioned before that its skin and its scales can be used to make all kinds of valuable weapons and armor and stuff. So he's looking at this god beast as not only a cash cow, which it is for him, but also he wants it to come to life so he can kill it. Because again, pathological need to hunt the biggest and bestest thing. We're talking about an elf. He has an eternity to show off how great he is at everything. His own men, his corsairs, who are probably his most trusted allies, have no idea what caused this obsession. But this obsession keeps delivering them to this huge stream of money, fame, fortune, resources. So everyone's super on board, but everyone's also equally confused as to why are we doing this? But he keeps pointing them towards the biggest and bestest treasures. And so then you get all these destruction factions, because all you have to do to get an orc to join your side is prove and demonstrate you can point them towards a better fight than they would have found on their own. And it is for that reason that I decided to join the Storm Dance Reavers. And so let's end this video by just doing a quick shout out why I think, basically one thing that I think is cool about each of these. Well, for starters, the Cult of the Burrowing Fang, the Voice of Ember's character, even though the faction as a whole may not have the most detailed motivations, that being a character-driven one with such a unique, cool character, I'm on board. Kind of the same thing goes for the Underbow Sepulchre. I know that it's more of a sales pitch. We don't know a ton of details about the glade that took over that area of Gur. We don't know a whole lot about the necromancer. There's a lot of things we don't know. But the sales pitch of death-themed Sylvaneth that are trying to raise, kill, and resurrect a god beast sounds so out there and wild that I think it's just pure Age of Sigmar. It's ridiculous. And finally, the Storm Dance Reavers, monster hunters who are looking for stonks on the side. Sign me up. I am, of course, taking the role of Wargog Prophet Durgrogs. That is my character that I made for Vault Wars, and I'm going to continue it forward. The Prophet has seen some good hunting by following Captain Castian Storm, and so that is what we're aiming for this year. Tell me your thoughts on these. I would love to hear them, and please consider joining me over on the Discord with Animosity this year. I'm going to be participating and throwing videos up as much as I can, and I really do hope to see you over there. So thank you all so much for watching and listening. I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.